Hello, I'd like to show you one of the many ways to make a purse net in this video. I will show you the basic tools and materials needed to begin net making, and I will show you a net being made in various stages from start to finish, so that after you view this you'll be confident enough to make your own nets. Let's begin with the basic tools and materials. The twine. This is available in all sorts of materials, colours and thicknesses. The twine I use is spun nylon polyester type. It is rot proof, highly visible when made into nets, which eliminates the chance of leaving nets behind while out ferreting. The net board. This determines the size of the meshes you will be knitting once you start making your net. The board can easily be made from aluminium like this one, or plywood cut about 3 to 4 mm thick and roughly 4 to 5 inches long. Net needles. This is a standard 8-inch black plastic needle. These needles are made to fit through a 1-inch ring and can be bought easily over the internet or from most shooting and fishing shops. The selection of other needles you see here are ones I've just made from bits of scrap plastic and aluminium I have lying about. As you see here, the needles are made so they fit easily through the centre of a 1-inch ring. Rings come in all sizes and quantities, but generally for rabbit nets I use these. They're a 1-inch fully welded chrome finished ring. These rings work out about 10 pence each depending on where you buy them from. You can get cheaper rings that are made lighter and are not fully welded, but personally I would not use the cheap rings. They'll come apart and that will ruin the net. To try and save a few pence it's just simply not worth it. Alternatively, some people use these wire sliders rather than buy chrome rings. Personally, I just use the chrome rings. They're ready made, there's no hassle, you haven't got to make anything, they do the job just perfect. And also when net making, you need a nice sharp knife at hand. Draw cord. This is available in all sorts of colours and thicknesses. I use a draw cord that's easy to see against the colour of the net that you're making. It increases the overall visibility of the net and makes the net easy to identify, which is handy when there's a few people ferreting in the same area with similar types of nets. This is just standard white draw cord, commonly used in net making. It works fine. The only problem I have with it is it discolours quite quick and it becomes less visible outside. You will need a sturdy anchor point to begin net making, something to keep the net tight when you're making it. Pre-manufactured net is available on the market. It comes in 4, 6 or 10Z. Personally I hate the stuff. It's prone for tangling. It's horrible stuff to work with. In my view, the best thing to do with this net is this. Cut it up and chuck it away. Before we begin, I'll show you a simple net plan for a 4-foot net that I use. It consists of 24 2-inch rows starting with 2 rows of 8 loops and then increasing a loop per row until you have 4 rows of 17 in the centre of the net, and then decreasing back down to 2 rows of 8 loops. I'll show you this once we begin. The first thing to do is load the needles up with the twine. Hold the twine with your thumb in the centre of the needle. Go 2 wraps around the centre spike, like so. Pull the twine down around the back of the needle. Round the centre spike, round the back of the needle, round the centre spike, back of the needle, and so on and so on. Keep turning the needle all the time. And keep wrapping twine onto the needle until it's quite full. Here's one of the homemade plastic needles I showed you earlier. I'm just going to load this needle up in the same way, using green twine this time. The reason why I'm using two coloured twines in this video is just that I'm going to knit a multicoloured net, and one with a stripe through it. It makes them easily identifiable. Also, I think it'll be easier for you to see the joining knot that I use with using two different coloured twines. The next part is to attach your chrome ring to your anchor point. All I've done here is extended from the hook with bits of draw cord, obviously just so I'm not reaching right across the table. We can remove the draw cord as the net gets longer and we get further away from the anchor point. And all I've done is loop the end of the draw cord over the ring, just making a quick release knot. Next thing you want to do is attach the twine to the ring. The knot I use is similar to a fishing knot, it's similar to a half blood. I simply put it through the ring, turn it round about 4 times, and slip it back through itself at the point where it touches the ring. Pull it tight, slide the knot up, and a nice hard pull, so the harder you pull the tighter the knot goes. Some net makers use different knots to tie on. This is just the one I've kind of stuck with. It works for me. Then I cut the excess off with a sharp knife, and the little bit that's left I just seal lightly with a lighter. Be careful when you're doing this not to burn the actual knot itself. You're only touching the end with a flame, just so it melts into place and there's no chance it'll pull loose. Now we can start knitting the first row of our net. This net board is 2 inches wide. It's got a tapered end just to make the loop slip off easier on the first part of the net. As you'll see, it can get quite tight. To begin, put your twine on top of your net board, like so. Take the needle underneath the net board and up through the chrome ring. Now down behind the net board and through the twine that's hanging. A little pull, then pull it tight over the top. Lock it off with your thumb so it doesn't slip. Back through the ring and pull tight. That creates a locker knot. Once again, underneath the board, through the chrome ring. Underneath the board, through the loop that's hanging. A little pull, pull it tight over the top. Lock it off with your thumb. Back through the chrome ring. Creates a locker knot. Up through the chrome ring, down back behind the board underneath, and through the loop that you've created. Take the slack up, pull it tight over the top of the board. Put your thumb on to hold it tight. Make a loop over the back of your hand, back up through the chrome ring, and pull it tight. And we carry on along until we have 8 loops. As you can see here, the loops that we're creating, they're nice and tight. To go through that again, up through the chrome ring, down below behind the board, back through the loop, like so. Take the excess play up, pull it tight over the top of the board. Put your thumb on to hold the twine and lock it into place. Loop over the back of the hand, back up through the chrome ring like that, and pull that knot in nice and tight. That locks it off and keeps it into place. Up through the chrome ring, down behind the board through the loop, pull it tight over the top, thumb on to hold it, loop over the back of the hand, needle back up through the chrome ring and pull tight. And there we are at the end of the first row with 8 loops. Now all I do here, I simply put an extra locker knot at the end of the first row. A lot of people don't do this, this is just my personal preference. Now we want to slide the first row off the board to begin our second row. As you can see, it's quite tight. Don't yank and pull and distort it too much. Be as gentle as possible. And there's the first 8 loops for the first row with the net board removed. Now we're going to carry on and start knitting the second row. Place your board under the twine, same as before. Needle underneath your board and pick the first loop up. Now it's quite important, do determine that it is the first loop, that they're not crossed over, otherwise you'll get a kick in your net. Put the twine over the back of your hand, put the needle under the 2 strands what was the loop you picked up, and then back through the one, all in one action, and pull down, creating a locker knot. Now I am going to show you this in more detail as we move further down the net. Just the first 2 rows are terribly fiddly. If you're going to make a mistake, you probably will do it at this stage, so please take care that you're picking the correct loop up all the time. So put your cord underneath your board, up through the loop you're picking up, pull it tight into the board, thumb on to lock it off, loop the string over the back of your hand and up behind the 2 strands of the loop you've just picked up, pull it through. Now this time you're going to come up through the centre of the loop, only coming behind 1 strand, so it's up behind the 2, round, up behind the 1 strand, which creates the locker knot. Pick the loop up with the needle, pull it into the board, loop the string round the back of the hand, up behind the 2 strands of the loop you picked up, then up behind the 1, like so. Pull that nice and tight. Once again, pick the loop up, pull it into the board, behind the 2, behind the 1, and pull that tight and lock it in. The knot I'm using throughout this net is called the double knot. Now a lot of people just use a single knot when they're net knitting, but personally when they're for myself I think it does the job that little bit better, so I always use the double knot. So that's the knot you'll see is used throughout the whole duration of this video. Here we are at the end of a 3rd row. Now we've just been knitting as normal behind the 2 and behind the 1. Now what I'm going to show you here, we're adding a loop. Bring the needle underneath the board and go up behind 1 strand. Pull that in, finger on, string round the back of the hand behind the 2 and pull a single knot just to create a locker knot. Now all we've done there, we've added a loop, but what you'll notice when you're taking it off the board after you add a loop, you've got 1 tight loop. It's a little short one, it's where you've added. So we've got 2 rows of 8 and 1 row of 9. and here we are starting our next row. Needle through the short loop, class that just as a normal mesh, round the back of the hand, up behind the 2, and then behind the 1 like that. Pull that in nice and tight to create a locking knot. Then just keep picking your meshes up as normal. Same procedure all the way. Behind the 2, behind the 1. Getting close to the end of this row, and I'll just show you again. Needle underneath, pick a mesh up, pull it into the board, thumb on, throw the twine over the back of your hand, behind 2, behind 1, and just pull that in to lock it. Same again with the last loop. Now remember, after this one we're going to be adding a loop, because we've got 2 rows of 8, a row of 9. Now this needs to be 10 loops on this row, so we go underneath, through the edge, single twine, needle up, pull it back over the board, hold it with your thumb to keep the tension, behind the 2, and pull that in. Now that locks your additional loop off. So we have 2 rows of 8, 1 row of 9, and this row here, which should be a row of 10. Once we've had a quick count there, just to make sure we've got the right amount of loops, turn the board over and pull the net off, ready for our next row. So we're using the same method all the way down through this net now. I will show you some of the points in more detail as we get further on. So we're going to be adding a loop to every row all the way down the net until we get to row 11. Once you reach row 11 you should have 17 loops in that row, and you don't want to be adding no more. I'll carry on making this net now. I'll show you a bit more in detail when I get round about the halfway stage. You don't have to make your nets outside. You can quite easily fix an anchor point indoors somewhere and do your net making while watching the TV. The only reason I have demonstrated this outside is to try and get better light for the benefit of this video. We've came down on it now, just having a count. We're at row 10, which has got 16 loops. We'll just double check that. As I said when we began, we're going to make a net with a stripe through it. So I'm going to use the green twine for the 4 rows of 17, which makes the centre of the net. Now as you see, I'm cutting that about 2 inches over the top of the board. The reason why, I'm going to join the green twine to it using a simple reef knot, which I'll show you. Now I want the knot to be about there where my finger is, so it falls in line with the row of knots that I'm going to knit. So cross it over underneath, 1 twist round the back, bring it up, and a simple twist at the front creates a simple reef knot. Now I haven't tightened this knot fully tight yet, because as you can see it's a couple of mil over where I want it, just so it falls in formation with all the other knots on how I'm going to knit. So before you fully tighten it, you can move it through a little. Now that's about there, exactly at the end of the 2-inch board. Now I pull it tight. Just get the two ends there and trim them close to the knot with a sharp knife. After that I just take the two little ends that's left and I just gently melt them with a cigarette lighter again. Be very careful doing this, because if you touch any of the main netting with a cigarette lighter it'll definitely snap, it'll create an instant weak point. And as you can see there, that knot's nice and tight. I've never ever had one of these knots move or come loose. Now we're just going to continue as before, up through the loops. Now if you've noticed, I've loaded this needle quite full. You don't need to have them this full, it's just I'm going to make additional nets after this and it saves us loading the needle again. If you've got a full needle it does make it quite tight when you first begin. So just the same as before, needle underneath the board, pick a loop up, pull it into the board, thumb on to keep a hold of it, behind the two strands of the loop you've picked up, then behind the one like that, and just pull it in nice and tight, and that forms your knot. Pick your loop up, pull it into the board, thumb on to hold it, behind the two strands, then behind the one, then just pull that in nice and tight. So now we're getting near the end of row 11. Now this is the maximum amount of loops that you will require on this net. This is the row that has 17 loops. So after you do your last one like that, lock it off behind the one strand, thumb on behind the two, and pull that to create a lock and knot. And just a quick count here to make sure that you have got 17 loops. And that's the 4 rows of 17 knitted in the centre of the net. And we haven't been adding an extra loop all the way down the side of these. We've just been ending the rows like that without adding the additional loop. And a quick count again should reveal that there's 17 loops in that row. So now we can remove the net from the net board. As you'll see, there's no short loop this time because we haven't been adding one, so then it just comes off nice and easy. And there we are, net's taking shape. Now is what I'm going to do. I'm going to change the twine back from green to yellow. So just as before, we want the knot spaced out on the edge of the net in a 2-inch space, so we can cut the excess off. Take the yellow twine, and once again we're going to make a simple reef knot. One wrap underneath, one wrap over the top, and pull the knot in. The harder you pull this knot, the tighter it'll get. A lot of people will just trim the ends and leave it trimmed. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Just when these are for myself, I like making it a little bit tidier, and I seal the ends with a cigarette lighter. If you are going to be using this method to seal the ends of the twine and the cord, please be careful because it melts. So it'll burn if it drips in your skin, and if you're working indoors you've got to be careful in case you cause a fire. If you're unsure about this method, just trim the ends with a knife close to the knot. I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll seal the ends with a lighter for personal preference only, it's definitely not a must. And just to show you the knot again, pick the loop up, twine over the back of the hand, needle underneath the 2 strands and through the 1 strand, and pull, and that creates the double locking knot, like so. At this point of the net, after we've knitted 4 rows of 17 loops, we're going to start to decrease. So the last 2 loops that you have like that, you've got to treat them as 1 loop. Now one of the ways is twine underneath the board, through 1 loop, then back through another loop. Now when you pull these into your board, you simply treat that as 1 loop. Thumb on to hold it. Now you're going behind the 4 strands, then up behind the 2 strands and pull it in. So there's 4 strands there, but you've paired them up and you've treated it just as a normal loop. So now this row that's just been knitted with the yellow twine has only got 16 loops. And same again, we're coming to the end of this row, there's 2 loops left. I simply use that method to pick 2 up at one time, pull it into the board, behind the 4 and behind the 2, so you've decreased another loop. This row here obviously only has 15 loops now. So we've kept decreasing loops all the way down throughout this part of the net until we come down to our 2 rows of 8, what we originally started with. On our last row we should have 8 loops, and we're not decreasing anymore. We're just picking the last mesh up and tying it off behind the 2, behind the 1, and that's the rows complete. And here we can just have a quick count of the rows. Goes all the way down, 4 rows of 17, 1, 2, 3, 4, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 8. After that, just remove the net from the board and we can start putting the last chrome ring on. To put the ring on, this is the method I use. Go through the ring, like so, pick up a mesh and pull it into the ring. Now as what you've done there, you've created a 2-inch space between the last knot and the ring. I use the same double knot I've been using throughout the net, behind the 2 strands, behind the 1, and pull it tight into the ring. At this stage the ring looks like it can move. When you go through the ring, pick up your next mesh, pull it into the ring, back through the ring again, pull that nice and tight, nip it off with your thumb, twine over the back, underneath the 2 strands, underneath the 1 strand of the loop that you picked up, through the ring, pick a mesh up, pull it into the ring, back through the ring, nice and tight, underneath 2 strands, underneath 1 strand, and keep doing this until you've tied all the meshes to the chrome ring. You should be forming a nice even row of knots through the chrome ring, pick your mesh up, pull it into the chrome ring, back through the chrome ring, pull it nice and tight, thumb on to lock it off, loop the string over the top, and underneath 2 strands and underneath 1, pull that in nice and tight. Now when I get to the end of a net, just like I did when I begin, I go under a single strand and just put an additional locker knot in the end of it. And I trim the twine very close to the knot, like so. Then as before, I just gently melt the end with a cigarette lighter, just to stop anything fraying. And there's our 4-foot net with a green stripe through it up to this stage. Now we need to put a draw cord in the net. To do this, I'll just put it back on the anchor point by the top chrome ring, have a quick check of the net, seeing that it's got no defects in, and choose your draw cord. Now as you can see, I've got different coloured draw cords. I use the yellow if I use the green twine obviously, but it's basically a yellow net, this one, so the red, as you can see, clashes nicely and makes it more visible again. So pull yourself a bit of draw cord off. I think this bit's pre-cut, I measured it before just to save a little bit time. Leave the net on the anchor point and just loop the draw cord over the top of it just for now. Pull the 2 ends of the cord together and stretch your net out. The only reason you're doing this is just to measure the cord. I'll leave about that much excess from the chrome ring to where the peg's going to go. That gives us plenty of room to tie a knot and obviously put the peg on. So once you've got your cord cut to the required length, we can start threading it through the net. Now I'll push it through the chrome ring and I come all the way around the edge of the net on the edge loops, weaving the cord up and down all the time. So all the way around the edge of the net, up one way, down the next, up one loop, down through the next loop, and so on, back through the other end chrome ring, and up the other side of the net, following the exact same procedure that you've just done. All the way back to the other chrome ring. I'll turn this net round a moment just to show you. When you've put your cord through, make sure the cord crosses over through the chrome ring that you haven't got both ends of the cord going through the ring in the same direction. Put both ends of the cord together and just pull it through the net, just to make sure both sides of the cord is even. The next thing I do, I get both ends of the cord and slightly melt them with a cigarette lighter. This is just to harden the ends of the cord. It just makes it a lot easier for it to push it through the hole that you've drilled in your peg. I'm going to show you that in a moment. Now about so far down the cord, just tie a simple knot. Pull it nice and tight. Now the net's ready for a peg. Now pegs, people use a lot of different materials. Standard wooden pegs like them, just shaped. More square type peg with a hole drilled through. Bits of shaped bar to make a small pin. Pre-made caravan tent pegs. People use all sorts of stuff. Personally, is what I do, I make these little light plastic pegs. They're made out of a nylon material. They cannot snap. You can put this stuff in a vise and bend it double. It just simply won't snap. I just make them from scrap plastic, cut up with a circular saw. Comes like in a big square. They're just offcuts from a local factory, and just cut it into rough strips like that. Once you've got them like that, I just put them on a bench grinder and turn them. It takes about 4 or 5 minutes to knock one up. Very light. Don't take up no room or nothing. Then just get what cord and push it through a pre-drilled hole which I've put in the top of the peg. Then I just tie another simple knot near the end of the 2 strands of cord. This will just stop the peg sliding off, obviously. Pull the knot nice and tight. Then just get your knife and trim some of the excess off just close to the knot. Once again, I melt the ends just with a cigarette lighter. This just melts the 2 frayed ends, makes it run slightly into the knot, and it means that knot will never move at all. And there's the 4-foot multicoloured net ready to use. When making nets, it's best to have as least joins as possible throughout the net. This one's got a few more than normal in it, which is for demonstration purposes to show you how the knotting system works. I hope you've enjoyed this net making video, and I hope you've picked up some tips along the way. For full feature DVDs, please visit my site, which is www.sh-pc.co.uk, and click on the DVD sales link.